So, recently I've been doing a lot of writing and discussing the topic of. I've been talking a lot about hip hop and rock and roll, the similarities and the differences. Now, you know, when I'm not making music, you know what? First of all, I want to begin with just my own personal journey I always like to cover. And what kind of happened to me was in my quest to make music, I suppose my curiosity took me to a place that most musicians never travel to. I kind of I took a huge detour and, ended up really studying and analyzing a lot of very diverse in different periods of music. It was really a big deal for me. I spent a lot of time doing it, and as I've said it once before in one of these videos. What ended up happening was I really actually almost didn't know how to juggle the time between making my own music and studying the music of others. Like, for instance, I will listen to a whole record even if I think it sucks, because I'm trying to I'm trying to study it and figure out why someone else would have saw the beauty in it. Do you get what I'm trying to say? That I'm constantly struggling with that. I have my own very strict opinions about who I think the best performers were, about what I think is so great about a particular genre, or what I think is so terrible about a particular genre. But at the end of the day, every genre does have some element of beauty, individuality, etc. And so what happened was I just became very obsessed with studying various periods of music, and almost accidentally feel that I gained a lot of knowledge of just the general music culture in general. I just know a lot about the various periods of music. I know many of the characters and their names because I listened to so much of it as I was trying to inspire myself. Other people that make music are oftentimes, for instance, a famous example is Jim Morrison, who his main inspiration to write music actually wasn't music. Like, Morrison wasn't a music fan. He was just a poet. He read people's poems. He watched films. He read books and lived strange situations and experiences, and that was basically what he used to inspire his songs. Now, you look at somebody like, every artist has a different source of inspiration. And some artists, if they live for a really long time, you'll see that their sources of inspiration change constantly. For instance, when you do look at Dylan, to bring it to Dylan, his source of inspiration was other music, which was Woody Guthrie. But Morrison was a very particular example when you say that his inspiration was really actually not music. And in fact, there is an interview, and I think it was a written interview, where Morrison actually says he didn't even listen to music. That's strange. I remember when I found that, I was like, well, that's the strangest thing I've ever. What do you mean, a musician, a singer who doesn't listen to music? Then it kind of makes sense. That's why his songs were so great, because he wasn't pulling inspiration from other musicians or other songwriters. Morrison was living in his own little world with his books, and that was all that stuff from the books is what he then threw into the song lyrics. He really wasn't interested. Beyond the fact that he did it as a job, he was not interested in music at all. I find that fascinating. A lot of people seem to think that it's like film stars. You often find when you ask a film star, well, a film star is very wealthy. A film star is typically, is very wealthy, is always traveling. They have a whole wealth of experiences. Why the fuck would they go, not to swear, but why would they go home and watch a film? They have a million things to do. They're in a very different, it's ironic, but it's not at the same time. They don't watch films, a lot of them. Some of them are huge film buffs. Oftentimes you find a director such as Martin Scorsese, who is actually obsessed with film, and I think does pass a lot of time watching film. Quentin Tarantino, he watches a lot of film. This is documented in interviews that you might read about him. But there's film stars who don't actually like film, or maybe they only watch cartoons. They don't actually watch highfalutin Oscar-nominated films or whatever, but they're still great film actors. You don't actually have to. It's hard to explain. I'm not really, Stephen King once wrote about writers. All writers need to read in order to be able to write. I think to an extent it's true, but I don't think they need to read obsessively. And here's why. Because there's many different opinions on this. For instance, when you look at, Bruce Springsteen once said, you will have all the experience you need to write anything you want by 18 years old. And in a lot of ways, that is true, but there's always more that you can get. It depends on what you want to write or create, I suppose. But at the end of the day, let's bring it back to hip-hop and rock and roll. So, I went way off topic, I always do. But with hip-hop and rock and roll, one of the things that bothers me about hip-hop is the fact that it doesn't want to collaborate in a large degree with anybody. It doesn't want to cooperate with those of us in the rock world at all. And this aggravates me because hip-hop was actually, believe it or not, a very crucial early life experience for me, that I heard hip-hop, long before I heard anything else. Long before I ever heard or ever actually knew what the blues were, long before I ever listened to all the truly great and significant and classic rock albums. Long before all of this, hip-hop was the first stop my train made. It wasn't my choice. It was a stop that I was forced to get out at. It was a stop that was shoved down my throat, I would describe it as. In many ways, I didn't want to be exposed to it, but forcefully was. And for this reason, it is kind of a traumatic genre for me, personally. But it was something that was forced down my throat at a very young age when I didn't want it, when I didn't know what was even happening in the world. And I was like an 11-year-old guy. I didn't know what was going on, and I was being forced to hear this music. And, that's not to say it was bad music, though. But what I see now... That's the thing I want to say, is that actually in hip-hop, I very much believe it to be a very, very, it's obviously a 21st century creation. Rock and roll song, you can only really say so much. Typically a rock song isn't really that long, but another thing that really strikes me as interesting about hip-hop is the fact that there were actually, kind of hip-hop artists who never actually, I feel, got the props they deserve for being rappers. Two of which that I'm thinking of this morning are Anthony Kiedis from the Chili Peppers and Bradley Nowell from Sublime. In my opinion, these two people were rapping, but you'll never hear anybody. You look at lists of rappers or something, and they're never on the list. And I don't know why, because they were rapping. Noel was doing it, Anthony Kiedis was doing it in the end of the 80s. You listen to those early Red Hot Chili Peppers albums, this guy was rapping. Even the most popular songs all around the world, me and my friend were listening to the other day, that guy was rapping. It was blatantly rapping. And no one interpreted it, and that's why actually I've come to a place now. Chili Peppers are actually a fantastic example of where rock and roll can and should go. I would personally like to see their style followed way more, because I think that was the best style. I think that they were one of the... I didn't listen to them for a long time because I was so lost in country western, Dylan land, Springsteen sort of thing, the working class ballad kind of music, that I didn't listen to the Chili Peppers as much as I probably should have. But I think that they are the quintessential example of a great rock and roll band that really is... how would you say, just quintessential for the 21st century. I feel that they represent it, the late 20th century and the early 21st century now, very well. And I think people will look back on them 20, 30, 40 years from now, and they'll say, this band was epic. They were doing everything. They did the slow acoustic ballads. They do the fast, funky thing where, Anthony is rapping. They do it all. They're not hardcore anything. You couldn't pinpoint them as a Zeppelin band because they're not, they're not, it's interesting. I don't know. But I think that personally, it just bothers me because I wish I had more acts like that available to me. That I could listen to acts like that, and it just bothers me sometimes.